Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what-ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Main Event. We have a Q&A special because we have completed another 5 years of Champions League history. That's 5 years of the Champions League. It hasn't taken 5 years, although to Adam it may feel that way. But we've asked you for your questions as we just like to take stock every 5 years or so. Adam is here. You may have heard me say his name already. How are we doing?
Good, thank you. I think it's a decent time to do it, isn't it? Every 5 years. On this, I still can't believe that's how I remembered it was time. I couldn't believe we're 9 months into doing this show. Seems like 9 real months. Seems mad. And I was thinking back when it was, and it was May, and I was like, oh, we must be due a Q&A now. So here we are. We're just about halfway through, I think, aren't we, in terms of what we want to cover. So another 9 months of our dulcet tones on a Tuesday morning to go. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Indeed, and Davey's here to make up the triumvirate. How are we doing, Davey boy?
I'm good, thanks, lads. Yeah, I think 5 years is a good time to stop and consider the changes that we've seen, because I think that's really been marked throughout this, and I don't just mean in the systems and in terms of the way it was set up, with the first couple of years and then just through the 2 group stage, but just football itself. And we can see these changes, and I can't help but feel that the Champions League has been the thing that has moved football on so quickly, because it's such a central thing that we all watch, that's there for everyone in Europe now. We all have access to it. I think that people see different styles of football and get inspired by it, and think, oh, I'd like to do that. The old Ray Wilkins thing about any kids watching. But I mean, even coaches and people within the game see sides, and they're impressed by what they're doing in a way that, Martin, when you and I first started watching football in the 80s, you could, if there were tactical innovations in Germany, it was very difficult for it to make its way over here. That isn't the case now. And even within these 2 tranches of shows that we've done, the first 5 and then this 5, I think you've seen several evolutions of football moving towards away from football that felt a long time ago at the start of it to a much more recognisable style of football to modern observers.
Yeah, you'd have to wait every 2 years, really, to see what the Germans were up to, of course. Not just with their mullets and moustaches. Dave, I'll stick with you for the first question, actually. We'll answer, all of us will answer everyone. This is from Blaine Tosh. What improvements or format changes would you bring in to make the modern day Champions League as exciting as it used to be?
I think you've got to look at it about how you want to do it, in terms of, do you want it to be the most exciting or do you want it to be fair? It's too early to judge on this season's. I must admit, my initial gut reaction to this, basically now a league, I don't particularly like it, because it deliberately removes jeopardy for the bigger sides. But then again, you could argue, given the way the group stages have gone, that makes it, the jeopardy had gone, yes, anyway. So I can understand this. The ESL has obviously been the thing that's prompted this particular move. But the issue that I have is, and I accept that this is because I'm a supporter of a side from a smaller country, is the top 5 leagues get 4 teams, sometimes more, one of them's won it, going into it automatically. And then we have to go through 2, 3, 4 rounds of qualifying to get into it. And I don't think that in any way allows you to close the gap. Of course, the gap's going to get further as they keep the money. So in terms of just sheer competitiveness, I think that I would change it to, you could have 2 teams from these leagues and the rest had to go through playoffs. Now, I know that teams 3 and 4 in England would, and Germany and Spain, would more than likely get through them. I understand that, but there would still be that increased risk of jeopardy. Personally speaking, I thought that in terms of a competition, 8 groups of 4 teams, followed by a last 16. That to me is your ideal tournament format, be it a World Cup or a tournament. But it's never going to go back to that. I think we can all accept that particular ship has sailed.
Adam?
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible in the way that it's set up just now. As David said, it remains to be seen. I do like certain aspects of this new format, but we're literally just one game in at the time of recording, so it's going to be difficult to see how that works. It's probably going to be a couple of years before we really figure it out. It's like you get down to the last 2 or 3 games and the jeopardy. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Who's clear? Who's not? Will come into play. I guess how the next round works in terms of seedings and all that. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it almost doesn't come to life until you look at it when you see the actual teams that are playing it. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I think David's point is a good one. So many teams going directly in, I'm not a massive fan of. I think there needs to be needs to be a something done there. Obviously, we know why. We spoke about it on here why. But yeah, something like 2 or maybe even 3 for the bigger teams, the bigger clubs bigger leagues, I should say, would be preferable. If we're being honest, asking teams like Liverpool or Arsenal, or whoever to qualify really shouldn't be that big a deal. To be honest, going through 2 rounds of qualifying if you finish third, or 1 if you finish third, and 2 if you finish fourth, shouldn't really be a big deal. I get bigger teams maybe don't want to play games that early, but that would be a nice little hook as well, I think, for the playoff games, which can throw up some interesting ties, but never really big teams sort of slugging it out. So that might be something that might add a little bit more interest into it. But other than that, I'm not too sure. I think there has to be an element of seeding and an element of sorting, which the group stages effectively were. And then the league qualification that is there now effectively does. But I think for many people, it really doesn't kick off until you get past Christmas and into that sort of last 16. So in a way, it works. You can't have it the way it was before, because we've seen lots of teams going out really early, and it becomes a wee bit of a not damaged goods, but it loses a little bit of its sparkle. So I think the setup of sorting out and having the hopefully big guns battling out in the spring is key. It's just about how you get there without making it a closed shop all the way through.
Or you just be quite honest about it and you make it just a closed shop and you say, right, this is for the top 5 coefficient countries or whatever, top 6 leagues or whatever, and then you make the Europa League and you be honest about it and you say, look, we don't want you in this. This is only you heritage fans from smaller countries who don't matter. Let's be honest. That's UEFA's opinion on it. But this sort of mishmash where you're only in it for the cash if you're a team of our standing, i.e. the league that we play in, you go into it for the cash, knowing that you're highly unlikely to do. You can't win it, basically. I think there's a real frustration there as a fan, but they will tell you that come the TV end of the tournament, the really big TV end of the tournament, they basically want a Super League, and let's face it, that's what it's always been moving towards, and this iteration is the nearest thing we've had to it, and will probably be a gateway format towards an actual league.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've spoken about this before. I know I'm very much in the minority. I don't like closed shops either. It's against sport, really. But I do like league football. League football sorts the boys out. We've known that forever. You've known at school that the best team wins the league. It doesn't always win a cup. I wouldn't just have one Super League out of 3 European leagues based on coefficient with relegation, but you leave your domestic league. The only league football you play. That was the original dream of Gabriel Huneau when he created the European Cup, but transport, travel, communication in the mid-50s just simply couldn't allow for that. That isn't a problem now. I would have teams go back to playing their own domestic cups and maybe even reinvigorate the domestic cups, because it's the only time they come back to play, and they're probably hated and blah, blah, blah. It would shake up maybe some of the domestic leagues a wee bit. And all of those teams in the 3-tier European League system, playing an open draw for what would be called the European Cup, and that's the only European Cup competition you'd have. I'd stop domestic cups and that European Cup at the quarter-final stage. I'd focus on the league finishes, and then you come together for a week of domestic quarter-final, semi-final and final, and then European quarter-final and semi-final to run up the season. And I've not heard an argument against that doesn't involve Hovis or some other bullshit. Adam, I'll go to you first for this one, please. Stuart Thompson, obviously they won the UEFA Cup that year, but would the Valencia team of 03-04 have a better chance of winning the Champions League than the 99-2000 or 2000-2001 teams?
So I assume that this means a better chance of winning the league in this, a better chance of winning the Champions League in this 2003-2004 season, because I don't think it's a better team than the Valencia one from years before.
I think that's what he means. I think he's saying, was it better equipped maybe then because it had slightly different options?
No, I don't think it's as good as the team from years before. But then I guess to the point of the question, taking the standard of the Champions League in this year, or taking the fact that a few teams came out. I mean, we spoke about it last week. Monaco versus Porto is not a Champions League final we probably expected to see at this stage. So in that sense, yeah, absolutely. But as we spoke about, Monaco scored a load of goals on their way through, and Porto were a really terrific team. So I'm not sure that this Valencia team, as I look at it just now, is markedly better than them. But I do agree with, I guess, the overall thrust of it, that there wasn't a big gun firing through the Champions League in this season. We've seen 3-4 big guns hitting the semi-finals and on top of their games, and that wasn't the case in 2003-2004. So I kind of take the point, but I just don't think that team was as good as it was a couple of years before, and I don't think it would have beaten either of those two teams in the final, personally.
Davey, would Rafa have won in 2000 or 2001 with that team? Would you have got to the final with that squad that they had?
No, I don't think he would have. It played a totally different type of football. And let's not forget, Valencia categorically should have won the Champions League in 99-2000. They completely shit themselves in the final. And the reason they did that was the badge on the shirt of the opposition. Less than the 11 players, believe it or not. I think had those 11 players been lining up for Bayern Munich or whatever, I think Valencia would have a better chance. In terms of just talent, then they should have done it. Following years of penalty shootout, that can happen. It's unfortunate. It's a German side, so maybe it's not unfortunate. It's just fate. But I take the listener's point about because it was a very good side, the one that won the UEFA Cup, as we know. But I don't think you can reach a Champions League final, particularly in that era, but even now, by accident or a favourable draw. I don't think you can scab your way to it. I think if you reach the final, then you were exceptional for maybe just 1 year, and maybe everything fell your way. But I don't think that should take away from how difficult it is to achieve it. I think because they're not big names, is there maybe a little bit of disrespect towards, for example, this Porto team? Because it's not a huge name of a club. But, is this Porto team, would you have fancied it to take on the 98 Real Madrid winning side? Personally, I would have.
I don't know if it's so much Porto, Davey. It's the combination of both Porto and Monaco.
Fair, yeah.
And Chelsea being in the semis. Now, Chelsea have got new money, but, clearly not quite together yet.
Deportivo
causing absolute fucking mayhem. So I think it's just, it was go back to a couple of weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago when we did the group stage for that, and you've got 8-2s and just weird results. It was just one of those seasons. Sometimes it's just in the air, and some big clubs in a bit of transition, and
it's a bit like Leicester City, and I do agree with that. But in what you said there about a league sorts, if you win the league, you can't have done it by accident.
No.
It's not like, with all due respect, Rangers can win a League Cup up here. Do you remember we won it in 98, and I think we'd beaten Falkirk, Airdrie,
Yeah.
St Johnstone in the final. It's not the most now you can only beat the teams you're drawing against, but the Champions League or a league title, you have to be very good. And I think that it slightly denigrates the efforts of these teams. It's not their fault that the so-called big guns had off nights and bad nights and went out.
I just think, given the Milan side around this time, if that freak in La Coruña doesn't happen, were they still going to be too strong for anyone left in those semi-finals? Probably. Porto under Jose would have made that very interesting. I think that would have been a very interesting semi-final.
They beat Chelsea in Depor.
But yeah, they do. But those are the things that are just absolutely outside of Porto's control, right? Or Monaco's. Like they had nothing to do with that. And it's big teams kind of fallen. It's been a bit of a freak result. And well, we have to make this count now. It's our year this year, kind of thing. And they very much did. Andrew Watson's not so much a question, but Rangers being the first team to ever be eliminated on head-to-head, not goal difference, is a talking point. We are nothing but pioneers in new ways to fail, Andrew.
Pioneers of shit.
Yeah, absolutely finding new ways of cunting things up. Here's an interesting one, Davey. Guy Incognito, one of my favourite patron names. Winning back-to-back Champions Leagues was a holy grail for a long time, 20-odd years. But in light of Real Madrid's utter dominance of the last decade or so, are we moving into the era of dynasties where one team will win 4, 5, 6 at a time or over a short period? Football does feel like that. With a straight face, you're probably only talking about 2 or 3 teams that you would really fancy winning it, and anyone outside of that, even though they could be storied names in European football, Davey, would be a surprise.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so far we've moved into the era of dynasty, but it is just the one. No one else has come along and done it. And I do think that it's quite important to stress that at this point. Could City do it, for example? Well, they have the resources. Well, things being equal, 115 reasons that they might not. But
it feels at this moment in time that whoever wins out of City and Real Madrid whenever they meet each other will probably win it.
Yeah, I think that is fair, and I think that at the moment that's where we are. I mean, I could look. Let's look around Europe. How many leagues are ultra competitive? I know people will point to Leverkusen, but I think that was the first non-Bayern league win since the war. And then, Italy has started to change hands a few times, but that came on the back of years of Juventus dominance. France, it's a foregone conclusion, as we know. City are now racking them up in England. Let's not forget that. They're record breakers there. So it kind of stands to reason, really, doesn't it, that if that's the case in domestic leagues, you'd expect it in the Champions League. But so far, only one club have cracked that code. It's such a difficult thing to do. I would argue that City last season, and I know that you could say, well, they ran into Real Madrid, but nothing was stopping them the year before, was it? I mean, they played Real Madrid and
they battered them,
annihilated them, absolutely destroyed them. Winning it 2 years in a row is really hard, really, really hard. And particularly, one of the things that I think is a little strange is Real Madrid, their fans can kind of live with not winning the Spanish league so long as they win the Champions League. Wasn't there that mad stat? They'd won 5 Champions Leagues and 1 league title during the spell. So City can't do that. Our domestic league is so Britain domestic league is so prioritised. Bayern certainly can't do that. I mean, they're burning down directors' houses and stuff over there because they didn't win the league last year. So, I would be very interested to see if a team does it. At the moment, I agree with you. I think that when I look at this year's Champions League, I'll be very surprised if the winners aren't managed by Ancelotti or Pep. Liverpool, you can never rule out in the Champions League, new manager or not, because there's just something about that club that they have that ability. Bayern Munich look as though they've got their shit together. Barcelona have started the season pretty well, but I wouldn't put a lot of money on either of those. So yeah, it's plus the new format, etc., all of that kind of stuff. But I think, I'm kind of looking at it, and we have one dynasty going on that's currently ongoing. Could City get in there among it? Yes. Apart from that, though, I can't really see a club that's got the resources to do this.
Adam, just bear in mind, this is a history show, and listeners, I think we've kind of made an executive decision, because at some point this is going to catch up on itself, and that doesn't become a history show. We don't have one of the great joys of doing things like this is that we have perspective, and we have many years perspective, and it's joining dots that we maybe hadn't before, or remember that. We're going to stop Real Madrid winning the Decima in 2014, I think. But at that stage, Adam, the Champions League kind of prided itself after the European Cup being characterised by hegemony, just 2s and 3s, and Ajax, Bayern, Liverpool, and then Milan, and just a club absolutely owning the thing. That just never been done before, unless you're going into 20 years, over 20 years. And then all of a sudden, Madrid managed to just keep doing it out of kind of nowhere, because I don't think anyone saw that kind of thing coming.
Yep. And again, I'm by no means saying it's best a bad lot or anything, but I think you've both articulated it quite well there. There's a dynasty there, which is absolutely fine. There's no consistent challenger. Barcelona are a bin fire for most of the last 10 years. I mean, Luis Enrique, a couple other bits and pieces, but certainly a couple of years after Guardiola left, they won at 2015.
Yeah, since MSN, since that, I think.
Yeah. So
call a great Barcelona side.
So that challenger's gone. Italy is done. They've had three Champions League finalists in that 10-year spell that we're talking about from 2004 onwards. And obviously in Milan were there 2023, and that was their first in about 10 years, I think. Liverpool probably unfortunate, or just not able to get over the line to have another one or two. Same with the Premier League. City, again, stupid decisions, all that sort of stuff. So there's teams shooting themselves in the foot. Bayern Munich haven't been able to replicate that Müller, Neuer, Lamb thing for best part of 6, 7, 8 years. So where are the credible challengers? Really, Man United, again, nowhere near for 10 years or so as well. So a team pops up every year or two and has a wee go at it, but they never quite manage to get themselves into the position. Real Madrid are untouchable in terms of finance, all that sort of stuff. They'll never go into the same issues that any other team have had. They're just too big for that situation to occur. So in a way, that is kind of the last 10 years is Real Madrid, but everyone else has shot themselves in the foot or this or that, and they're the only one of those big teams that we speak about that has stayed consistent. So maybe it's just the way that the game has gone. Italian clubs are done, really, as a force. Premier League clubs are maybe fighting with a really competitive Premier League and not necessarily taking the eye off the ball, but getting wiped out. And Madrid have nothing really. I know Barcelona have been winning the league on and off, but in terms of Europe, Madrid have been the only one that's there. So I'm not going to say it's a Leicester 2016 best of a bad lot thing, but maybe it explains why they've been able to go back time and time again on it. And until we get a consistent challenge, and if that is Man City, I'm not even sure it is, because Guardiola feels at the end of his cycle now to be honest.
It doesn't look like starting a dynasty there. It's something like
100%.
Maybe not at the beginning of the end, but certainly the end of the beginning. Like he's absolutely on.
I don't think he's going to be there in 5 years, for example. So can I just also chuck in the fact that last year the final, Borussia Dortmund versus Real Madrid, everyone knew who was going to win that game, and Borussia Dortmund had a right good go at it. Remember, I mean they did,
That's
and even during that, Real are going to win this anyway, and of course they go on and they do it. Real have established themselves, and not just to us sitting watching it from skin in that end of the game. I think they have to the other clubs in Europe. I think there's a bogeyman element to them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of clubs now, I
when
don't
it comes to
think
knockout football, you need to be like 5-0 up. I mean,
they are just so, and I think that conversely, it sweeps through that club that they just, well, yeah, of course we're going to win it. We always do. This is who we are. Someone will have to stop that, because it does mean that when Real Madrid get to the latter stages, which they invariably do, they develop a momentum, and I sometimes think the other clubs almost believe that themselves. So it will take someone. Like, we could be sitting here in 5 years, Arsenal could have 3 European Cups, right? I mean, I don't think they will, but it's not unbelievable. They've got a manager who appears to be at the other end of that cycle, who appears to be, have built something. But right now, to Adam's point, Arsenal, the league title, that's what they care about. That's the thing that they desperately want. And again, that's what makes it the richest league, England. The thing that makes it difficult for them is you have 38 games that are tough. That you can come a cropper against a Crystal Palace, or away from home against an unfan Nottingham Forest or whatever, in a way that you don't really get in Spain or Germany, right? There are a lot of fixtures there that you can sort of coast on. And then the last point is, who knows, lads, maybe in 5 years it's a Saudi team.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing about Real, though, I guess historically, is they have managed to swing quite wildly, actually, from glory to absolute nonsense, and they've got a self-destruct button. Again, the period that we've just covered, these 5 seasons, where they've won 2 in that time, and now we're not going to talk about them really seriously for quite a fair bit, because they disappeared up their own arse for quite a while.
Some right doings coming up. Remember the time Steven Gerrard basically wiped his arse with them at Anfield?
Yeah. So they looked, indestructible, as they have done recently, but they just have a time to say, you know what, we'll have a wee time out, give other sides a go. Ross Guild, which key players had the most significant impact on the team's success in this period? I'm going to suggest it's the 5 years, 99 to 04. Personally, I'd pick Zidane. Would you guys pick anyone different? Now, given that we're going to get a question about just the best players in this period coming up, I'm going to assume that Ross means impact, and it means, just that, maybe not the best player, but the best player for that team. I would choose Raul. 2 goals and 2 finals. For all the Galacticos, the heartbeat of that Real team that was very successful. That's peak Raul. I love him anyway, but just in terms of impact and importance over this time, I'd go with that. Maybe Seedorf or Pirlo in that kind of resurgence of Milan. Adam?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because we've got a similar question coming up around over the piece type stuff. So for me on this one, given that I'm going to defer to the wording of the question, impact on their team's success in this period. For me, it kind of really only needs to it really needs to be someone from Madrid or Milan. I think so. With my next answer in mind on this one, I think I'm going to go for Maldini. Defense was key for Milan. We spoke about it in the early shows. He is probably the longest serving player at this time. I've not crunched the numbers, but yeah, certainly, he's certainly up there. He's in his peak at this point. Yeah, he was the heart of that team for a long time. Even at 2004, when we're talking about it, and he would go on for a good few years after that. He's been a constant for Milan through those great Saki, Capello, Ancelotti, now seeing teams. So I think I'll probably go for Milan and Maldini.
Davey?
I'll go slightly different then to you lads, because you've gone for the winning teams. I'll go for teams who didn't win as much in this period, but did do some. I was going to pick a Valencia player, but he's in my list for the other question, so I won't. I'm going to go for Deco. I don't think that Porto side can do what it does without him that year. And I know it's not the same tournament, but the year before also, as well. He knitted everything together, didn't he, in such an intelligent way. It was a great side, and it had loads of talent, but it was a machine-like side, wasn't it? And to me, he was the one nut or bolt or cog that if it had been out, I'm not sure it functions as well as it does. It still would have functioned, by the way. I'm not saying that it wouldn't have functioned to that level. He's a player I'm glad we've cast a wee bit of light on, because he's a player that doesn't get mentioned, and yet when you do mention it, everyone say, "Oh, he was brilliant." So I think he deserves a little bit more love than possibly he gets. But he wasn't a flashy type. He could do flashy things, but do you know who he kind of reminds me of? Gundogan in the modern era. Just so vital, and doesn't mean that he's beaten 5 men, or but he's always doing something, and the team just looks so much better when he's in it. So I'll go for him.
Good for him. Scott Watson, I'd completely forgotten the 2 group stages was a thing. Genuinely quite baffled that it left no trace in my mind at all. Having had a chance to revisit them, how do you reflect on how well they worked? How exactly did the inexorable expansion of the season actually get reversed in this case? And how do you feel it stacks up against this season's fruit salad approach to European expansion? Davey, I think it became toxic for whatever reason. It became, I think, just associated with greed. Games for game's sake, not having any football value. And the season we've just finished was the season that moved from the 8 groups, which is fine at the start, into a last 16 for the first time in the Champions League. And that was the case until the season we're living in now, right? That lasted 20 years or whatever. So clearly that worked. So it just became a kind of association with unnecessary greed. But that was not reflected in my look back at this period. I think there's a recognition that the first group phase is now kind of a dress rehearsal. It's kind of going through the motions for some big clubs who are now starting to become so big compared to some of the lesser countries. So we want group football that is genuinely top class. And it kind of gave us that.
Yeah, I did a 180 on it. I've got to say that I think I'm proof of how well the propaganda campaign against it worked, because I just had it in my mind. It was terrible. It really wasn't. And then when I started seeing the games back, what it was, and I think you've alluded to it there, Martin, and just what you said, which was that the big teams who assume that they're going to be there at the business end just saw it as an encumbrance. They'd rather just get to that business end as quickly as possible.
Because it was a different kind of jeopardy, not cup knockout jeopardy, but it's fucking harder jeopardy. Some of those groups were 4 really good teams.
Yeah.
And especially, by the way, if a big club, in inverted commas, had maybe been treating the first group stage in their slippers, got caught out a wee bit, had to do a bit of work, ended up second, and therefore were not seeded going into that, you end up with some mega groups.
They wouldn't bother, and that's why they didn't like it. But like I say, I am testament to how well the propaganda campaign from these bigger clubs with too much football, waste of time, really was, because they did a number on me. But when I went back and looked at it, I thought, my God, I would pay serious money to watch groups now of this quality, a group stage with these teams in it. And the current setup doesn't replicate that. It genuinely doesn't. The argument was too many games. And again, that's maybe back to your point about if you're in the Champions League, do you need to take part in a League Cup, for example? Might have been something to look at. But yeah, just the evidence is stark. It was good. The second group stage was good. It contained big teams, real jeopardy, titanic matches between heavyweights, loads of great football goals, loads of jeopardy, everything that we as neutral viewers want, but everything that the clubs didn't want, particularly at the pre-Christmas stage.
Adam, any other thoughts on the second group stage before we bury it, never to be spoken about on the show again?
Nothing that I've not said before in terms of how surprised I was about how interesting that was. I think taking it away, can't necessarily think of too many barnstorming last 16s, but I'm sure there've been plenty. So yeah, taking it away, I think it's one of the rare occasions where they actually reduce the number of games, isn't it? And in a league situation, I don't know, maybe more the thing that we spoke about earlier on with the fourth place finishes and coming in and all that sort of stuff maybe impacts it more than just this change. I think it's maybe been quite unfair that the group stage was rubbish, or people think the group stage was rubbish, and then this happens. So, no, I certainly enjoyed looking back at them. Would I want to have 2 rounds of group stages now? Probably not. I am quite interested in this fruit salad of a league, as Scott calls it, coming up, because it removes the whole, we beat this team and therefore we need to make sure that we need to watch for this other team beating this team.
There's virtually no jeopardy in it, Adam. All the big teams are going to absolutely sail through. And I get that, they were in the 4-team groups anyway, but they're going to do it with a lot more ease now. 3 wins, 4 wins, you're probably through. And
I get maybe to give some more relevance to some of those the pot 3 and pot 4 teams, that they have comparable clubs to try and get some mileage against.
I think that's what I'm hoping from, because there's a group of death usually every year, isn't there? Sometimes there's 2. I think we even seen one, didn't we, with Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Dortmund, and Victoria Pilsen. Was that? I feel like that was recently. So in that sense, that's not going to happen anymore, which means those sort of lower to mid teams might have a clear run. Looking at it positively, Davey, like you said, if one of those teams, there is one close to home that I don't want to make the example of, get a relatively...
Another reason I don't like it.
Get a relatively easy-ish draw and they get those 3 wins right away and they're through. That maybe changes things up a little bit. But for me, it'll be interesting to see how it settles down this year. If it is as easy as you say, and I probably think it will be, but then those sort of bounce, what's the word? Can't think of the word. Yo-yo teams that maybe might be in, might be out. What happens with them? What that then means for the knockouts, all that sort of stuff. It's got potential for me, but if it just ends up in what we expect, then yeah, fair enough. There's probably a lack of jeopardy there.
Adam, you can get first dibs on this. Mikey Anderson has asked the top 3 players over the time period in this competition. So I guess I'm going to interpret time period as 98-99 to 2003-04. Top 3 players in the Champions League. Okay,
so I'm sorry if you ask me for top 3 players in the 90s are involved, then I'm putting Ronaldo in. I don't care
involved.
if I don't care.
You're putting him in for 45 minutes at Old Trafford.
Exactly. Yes.
It's Adam's pick, Martin.
Aye, right. He's had two seasons pretty much, and the Inter one wasn't really much to write home about. But this is joint my show, and he's my
That is up there with the time that Cammy had the first pick on the draft of all Rangers players in history and picked Chris Boyd.
That's right. It's not as bad as that.
No, it's not as bad as that.
Nothing.
Right, so nothing is as bad as that.
I'm going to go for one favourite and 2 tops then. And David is spot on. But there's also, I guess, that the aspect of that redemption arc with that hat trick at Old Trafford. I think it's a reach, obviously, but given how much of an impact he had on me personally watching that Barcelona team, as we've said, I know it's not the Champions League, but then coming into this period, just my favourite non-Rangers player of all time. So the fact that he was in the Champions League, scored that hat trick, had that redemption arc, I find that really satisfying. So I'll put him in there as a favourite, if not a bog standard.
You do love him. I mean, to be fair, the listeners, Adam genuinely adores Ronaldo. Like, watches YouTube videos, loves him.
Whole thing. So yeah, my next one will be Shevchenko, and might even have a case to be my favourite over 10, 12 years that we've covered, to be honest. But even just in this 5, he's been fantastic. From his couple of years at the end of Kiev to the first 3 or 4 at Milan, I think 37 goals in 6 seasons in the Champions League. I'm not sure many would be ahead of him at that time. Ballon d'Or 2004 as well. The only other one I can think of in terms of sheer goal scoring numbers would be Inzaghi, which probably explains the Milan strength at this time that we're speaking about. So Shevchenko would be in there. Others, Rivaldo, I kind of thought, yeah, but I discounted him because it was only really 2 or 3 years. He never won anything, which makes me a hypocrite for the Ronaldo one, but here we are. Seedorf, Thuram, liked him as well, but I think my final pick will be Roberto Carlos. And it's maybe more of a personal one as well. Obviously, he wins it during this period, but just changed the game as a fullback tactically. I think so. Dani Alves comes along on the other wing and for the other team in Spain and does it again, changes it into something else, which is probably more lasted longer in terms of what we understand fullbacks to be. But Roberto Carlos is one of my favourites at this time.
But we're still allowed to talk about Roberto Carlos,
That's
so
true.
he has that in his favour.
That helps.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's maybe one of the out there ones. But I think in terms of longevity as well, he's been here through this whole period into Milan and then Madrid. Way ahead of his time. That enormous engine, obviously that power from free kicks and shots. So yeah, I'll go for Ronaldo, Shevchenko, and Roberto Carlos as my top 3 / favourite players over this time period.
Good choosing. Well, most of it. Davey?
Gaika Mendieta, who was incredible in the first couple of seasons here. As good as anyone on the planet at the time. I'm not going to pick Oliver Kahn because we tend not to pick goalkeepers, but massive influence on that side. Absolute prick of a human being. And obviously there's a whole Moles thing, but I'm not going to pick him. Mendieta was a definite. I am going to pick Seedorf. Adam mentioned him there. Just composed, calm, at the heart of absolutely everything in that Milan team. Beloved in Milan. They recently played Liverpool in the Champions League, and he was a pundit, and the fans were, even as he was doing his pundit duties, were shouting and trying to get to him. Just a wonderful player. I just don't think you can do this 5 years without picking Zidane. Now, I don't always buy in as much as people do into Zidane, because I think his best performances came at international and Champions League level for his clubs. A lot of times in his domestic leagues, he just wasn't a factor. Real Madrid, but put him in this tournament, put him in a France shirt at a tournament, and you got a completely different level of player. So yeah, I'm going to go for Zizou.
Cheers. Yeah, there's a few in there that if I was just picking on my own, I probably would pick Mendy, definitely. But there is one I will share, and I'll share with Adam, and it has to be Sheva. I think he's just consistently brilliant in so many different ways. So I kind of have to have him. Any draft I seem to do around this time, someone always says, well, if you have the choice of Paolo Maldini, you choose Paolo Maldini. So he's just a freak of a football player. The biggest tragedy, of course, giving up Italy just before they won the World Cup. But he would have to make my 3. And to go a wee bit off the beaten track a little bit, because his team wasn't quite good enough to win at the time, but Ruud van Nistelrooy was scoring more goals than anybody else for quite a substantial part of this period. So as an absolute out-and-out striker, he probably deserves a wee shout-out in this question as well. So I'll go for Ruud. Second final question, penultimate is always called. David Clapperton, from the very start of the Champions League rebrand until now, pound for pound, who's been the best player, manager, and team? Shall we go around the houses, I guess, in terms of the three different ones. I'll start with the easy one, which is team. And I guess I'm going to take this from 92, 93 until 03, 04. I think that's what David means.
Yeah.
Ajax have to be the best pound for pound team over that period, right? Just because of the way they assembled their squad for literally the amount of money they paid. No? Any objections to that? Definitely not on the top right-hand side of my screen, that's for sure.
No, when you think of the, great sides, but they were assembled at big costs. That wasn't the case there, so it has to be.
I would potentially even be having Ajax if we removed the pound for pound as well. Just to be honest,
I know. Yeah, and there's definitely an argument
for
that as well. But when that's brought into the question, it's an absolute no-brainer. Manager, to my mind, probably two managers should not in this period be lifting the Champions League, have no real right to be lifting the Champions League, and that would be Jose and Hitzfeld. Fair or unfair? Hitzfeld with Borussia Dortmund, one must say. Later on. So 97 and 04 seem to be the ones we like, what? So any others stand out?
He didn't lift it, but Hector Cooper's got to be in there, surely.
For his work, yeah.
Yeah, just built an incredible attacking side. And it is a bit of a shame, I think, that he didn't get them over the line at least one of the years to have that. But it is a deserved knock. You have to say he didn't get them over the line. But, did Valencia have any right to be the best team in Europe for 2 years, which they were?
Yeah.
They can't boast it, but they were. I think I don't disagree with your selections, by the way, because they won it, and that does take you to a different stratosphere. But I do think he's at least worth a mention in dispatches.
Adam, any other manager ripping up trees that around this time that really shouldn't have?
Yeah, so I guess taking the pound for pound part of it literally, I think it needs to be Mourinho just for that team being created and winning back-to-back European trophies. I think it absolutely has to be. Removing the pound for pound, Del Bosque's the only manager who's won it twice at this point. Obviously, maybe even Capello for me as well, coming into Milan and doing what needed to be done in that 94 one is up there as an achievement as well, but not when you put in player costs and all that stuff. So yeah, I think it needs to be Mourinho for me in that one.
What about player? Who was taken up but very little cost? Again, would you go back to that Ajax team, Adam? Seedorf, Davids, the De Boers, maybe? I mean, Seedorf, again, just keeps coming into my mind all the time. But
I think pound for pound should be signing. There should be some wisdom about a club.
Great deal done.
A youth. I totally get, because a youth player obviously is the ideal. But I think, just in the spirit of the question, I think it should have to be.
Are we too late then for Makalele?
That's a good shout.
Who would spring to mind? I can't remember how much Madrid paid for him. Obviously, just under the radar compared to.
What about our very own Gennaro Gattuso, who was signed for €6 million by AC Milan?
Yeah, he's going to come to the fore next, though, isn't he? He probably misses out on this particular period, no?
Yeah.
Milan, Adam?
No. I sort of get the point in terms of the youth players, because if we take it literally, yeah, fair enough. Maybe still Seedorf, to be honest. That fee going from Samp to Madrid wasn't high at all. It was like 6 million or something at that point. So when you think Sampdoria to Madrid, 96 it would have been, yeah. And those 4 years at Madrid, part of that great team that we've spoken about, the great midfields, etc. I'd maybe have Seedorf up there. In that, I'm sure there will be others like Littmanen, for example. We spoke about coming in from Finland, Finland and doing this and that. But yeah,
and the job he did for Liverpool.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
I in the interest, Martin, of trying to contribute to make this show as good as possible and as thorough as possible, you would probably have to mention Lambert
Yeah.
A free transfer from Motherwell, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
To go and play such an important part. And had he not, sold out his family and his birthright by his next move, I would have put him forward.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be naming a show after him, probably.
Yep.
And maybe, I mean, they weren't as good as the Ajax side, Adam, but you have to give some props to United's homegrown players and the impact. Giggs, Beckham, Scholes, Neville, but blah 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 blah. Because clearly consistency, great consistent level at this elite stage. Great question though, David. And
one last one. Manchester United bought Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Ronnie Johnson for a combined cost of £2.5 million.
Yeah, well, they got their money's worth.
Last one, the only other one for me that I could think of, and it's he maybe goes on to be a really good value pound for pound signing again, as well as Madrid buying Morientes for $5 million and winning the 3 Champions Leagues in this spell would probably be up there as well. I can't off the top of my head remember how much people Inzaghi went to Milan for as well, for example. Probably not huge amounts, but yeah.
Great question. And George Higgins again about the state of play, I suppose, currently. Should the new format change to allow a drop down for the teams from 17 to 24 to go into the Europa? It would cut the playoff round for the Champions League and not increase games in Europa if they did the same with the European Champions League. So that is another big difference of where we are now, Davey. That safety net has gone. Good thing or bad thing?
I always like to drop down. Because it was beneficial to a club of our size, and I think that there's enough things go against teams from nations like ours with it taking another one away. So, from a selfish Rangers point of view, probably a bad thing. But I do understand now that you're guaranteed European football after Christmas now. You have 2 matches. So I think the argument is, well, you have the 2 extra games and the revenue anyway. But yeah, I always liked it, and of course, we've shown how you can benefit from that. I think that it's definitely something that a lot of teams from smaller leagues had, and it gave you something to play for in the group stage. So the argument, because a few wins can get you through, does change the dynamic. But I do think it was important in the previous format, because as Adam said, say you got a draw that you had, Bayern Munich and Real Madrid in your group, they're going through. You did at least, you could say, right, well, we can get third here. We can definitely get third and get that. So your games all the games meant something. Everyone in the group had something to play for. I do get though the argument of, well, it's unfair on the people who are in that other tournament, and also you do have 2 extra fixtures that you didn't previously have.
Wow. There was a question on Twitter, not necessarily related to our shout out from Orangi Boom, who said, Martin, any chance you could do some sort of Italian Serie A show in Heart and Hand with the same format? Never met a person who didn't enjoy watching James Richards on Channel 4 on the weekends. You, Adamski and Edgar on it, just a thought.
Why do people keep second naming me? This is becoming increasingly prevalent. I know, but I don't like, I don't call people by their name. I don't say hi, Ramsey and Thornton. It's just,
despite
what I've done. I'm a really nice guy, and I'm getting second named here.
You really did. I would never take that as a slur at all. I would take that as a sign of respect. I know you want Mister in front, but anyway, yeah, I am pleading, Orangi Boom. I am pleading that when we do finish this, that we take your deep dive format and plunge into when football was best, and that is Italy in the 80s and 90s. Anyway, we did think, did we have enough questions for a show? And 55 minutes later, we certainly do. Thank you, Davey.
On the Italian show, yes, I've just done I've done a deep dive myself just into, do you remember Hans-Peter Briegel, the German who inspired Verona to their title? So I would definitely be up for that. Thanks, listeners, for the questions, and thanks, lad. Enjoyed the chat.
Cheers, Adam.
Thank you. Yeah, right up for a Serie A show. It's been interesting. Obviously, we've spoken about the differences between the domestic competition, what that means for the Champions League. So going back and doing the inverse of that would be quite useful. But we have 10 years and the aforementioned
Long
9
way to
months
go.
to get through here first. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. That was an enjoyable show. Great questions.
Yeah, they were great questions. Should be done by April or May on this, but plenty to look forward to, including 0405. Jose Mourinho's Chelsea and something like 21 goals and 2 knockout ties, hiding in laundry baskets and naming Barcelona's team before, the birth of a new rivalry, and of course one of the greatest finals of all time. Plenty to come. And until next time, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts, and breakdowns dropping every other day.